This is contract work for a museum. My task was to photograph some exhibits for a catalog. The requirement was to extract the object and provide them with a white background. Since the objects were in an old storage room, I had to improvise to get reasonably satisfactory results. I had 2 softboxes at my disposal and a frame with a white sheet as a background. Since I knew from the beginning that I had to edit these photos afterwards, I decided to underexpose the photos by a full stop to prevent overexposure and have enough space for the rework. The process will take place in 2 major steps. First, I will do the basic corrections with Darktable, and then prepare the image with GIMP for publication in the catalog. Okay, let's start. First, I would like to correct the exposure. About 2 stops, maybe. And white balance. That looks good. The next step is to add some local contrast to the image. Yeah, maybe one more instance, so that the texture of the horse is well articulated. Yeah, that's fine. And now I would like to do some lens correction. I'm just going to have to find my lens here. Like this. And chromatic aberration. Let me see how the picture looks all over now. Yeah, that looks good. How does it look down here? There's one more thing. Here, the defringe module could be used to correct it a bit. I take this local average option. I increased it a bit, radius and threshold. Let's see if that changes anything. Yeah, it looks better. Maybe even higher? Yeah, something like that. Let's see if this gets me some artifacts somewhere else. Yeah, everything seems fine. So let's see what the noise looks like. Yeah, there seems to be some noise. This could be done with the denoise module. I like to use wavelets for these purposes. They seem to preserve a lot of detail. Better than this local means. And if the image is a little noisy, it's not that bad. I think it's fine. That's good enough. So next, maybe give it a bit more contrast. With the color balance, let's see how far I can go. This is too much. Maybe a little bit. Boost the power a little. If it's a little overexposed, it's not that bad. The main thing is that the figure itself is not affected. That seems to be good. As a next step, maybe we make a new instance of color balance to increase the brightness of the object itself. So we start a new instance of color balance, and to brighten up the object, we use a parametric mask. Preferably with colors. Let's see what happens when I only leave red and yellow in the mask. Not much is happening, but there is another possibility. The object is saturated in color, in contrast to the canvas background. That means we could try a little with saturation. I'll turn the mask indicator back on. Oh yes, it's better. Let's see if I can isolate the object a bit better without affecting the rest. Yeah, maybe something like that. To increase the feathering a bit? Yes. Mask contrast? And opacity? This may be too much. We take a step back, like this. That looks good. We got the mask now. And now, we simply increase the brightness. First here with gamma. No, not that much, and also with slope. And maybe a little bit of contrast to that. Let's see how far I can go. Okay, this area is already starting to get overexposed. Well, a little less. Okay, let's have a look. Before, after. Yeah, that's fine. So the question is, do we have to do anything else? I will, here, finish with Darktable. We will now export the image and continue our work in GIMP. So, we are now in GIMP. I exported the image from Darktable as a 16-bit TIFF and loaded it into GIMP. The first thing I would like to do now is convert the image to a 16-bit TIFF with floating point precision and linear light. I've found that if you process the image in a linear color space, there are fewer artifacts, especially if you use brushes. The transitions are smoother. That's why I converted it. Next, I'll make a copy of the layer and would like to increase the contrast a bit. Yeah, like this. Okay, and maybe a little bit more saturation. That should be enough. We will now extract our figure. And before we do that, I would like to duplicate the last layer so I can compare them afterwards. Extraction is done with the foreground extraction tool. This is one of the strongest tools GIMP offers. As a first step, our horse needs to be masked. Rough. Use a curve. Well, that doesn't have to happen perfectly, but the more precise the algorithm will be to extract our horse from it. It's worth the effort. With the Enter key, the selection is confirmed, and we have our horse roughly masked for now. Through this masking, we have shown the algorithm where our object is located, which means we've also shown him what we don't want. We don't want anything that dark blue. And in this light blue area is our best object. Now in the next step, we have the possibility to define the object more precisely. And for this, we have 3 different possibilities on the right. To paint the foreground, which means we can use this brush to show the algorithms what belongs to the object. With the option Draw Background, we show him what we do not want to have here, what does not belong to the object. And this Draw Unknown, that is the area where the algorithm tries to find the boundary between the object and the background. First of all, I would like to clarify the background even more, because we still have a few empty spaces here, which have to be separated from the object. Now I'm going to choose this brush, choose the appropriate size for the brush, and repaint these areas. As I said, the more precise, the better. As you can see, these areas also become blue, which means that we show the algorithm that we don't need these areas. This is part of the background. So we've completely masked the background, and in the next step, we will show the algorithm what we want to have absolutely. That means we will now paint the foreground. Same procedure, select the brush size, and get started. We've now finished masking. We've identified the background and the foreground, and in this light blue area, the algorithm will try to calculate the edge of the object. For this calculation, we have 2 algorithms at our disposal. Matting Global, this is the fast algorithm, but not as precise. And as a second option, there is Matting Levin. This is much better, but also much slower. We will definitely use Matting Global first to see how good the selection is, and if everything worked well, we will use the second algorithm, which makes it much more precise. The algorithm is started by simply pressing the Enter key, and it starts calculating. From the way it looks, that's pretty good. Actually, we could leave it like that, but I will try to use the Matting Levin algorithm to see what this algorithm offers us. But it is much slower and it takes a while. So now it is finished, and as it looks like we have chosen very nicely. If we are satisfied with it, we simply click here on Select, and selection is there. Now we can copy this selection. I always save this selection into a channel first in case you want to use it again later. Now we can go back to the layers, and with Control and C we can copy the selection, and then with Control and V we can save it to a new layer. Let's see what it looks like. It looks perfect. Great selection. Now we have the object extracted, and we have to take care of the background. The simplest version is when you create a new layer. This is relatively easy by clicking on the layer below, and then creating a new layer here. The color is background color, and now we have the object in a neutral white background. That does not look elegant. There are no shadows and the object seems to float. A more elegant way is to take advantage of the layer we already have. I'm undoing this. This layer, what we have here, also has shadows. But first we have to remove our figure from this layer. And we do this by going to the upper layer and right-clicking on the Alpha 2 selection, so we have our selection again. Then we go to the lower layer and simply remove the selection. Now we have a white background. The point here now is to keep the shadow part without the crumpled parts of the fabric. We can do that with a Gaussian blur, but to get a reasonable result, we have to match the color of the area where the horse was located to the rest of the background. You can do this by using a brush, preferably very large. Maybe a little less opacity. And you look for a place in the background that matches the color, like here for example. And then you paint over the horse, or over this area where the horse was. And if possible, always look for a new position so that it fits the color as far as possible. But we must be careful not to remove these shadows. We have to work very carefully. Although here it is no problem because everything is masked. In that sense, we don't touch the shadows at all, so we can go over them. So this should look something like the background. And here we have to continue the shadows into this cutout area. This means we now have to reduce the size of the brush and select these shadow areas. Maybe increase the opacity a little bit and go along the edges. So that in a certain way these shadows continue into this cutout part. Select again and again from the background the color that fits and just paint over it. Not much to do here. Definitely here. It must look like something like here in the unselected area. It does not have to be very precise, but you have to be careful not to cross the border too much. Well, maybe that's enough. I'll make a copy of this layer in case anything goes wrong. And now we turn on the top layer and don't select anything. Let's see what happens if we apply a Gaussian blur now. Oh yes, here we go. This is perhaps too much. We now have the shading. Now we can continue painting on the rest of the layer. Maybe a little more. Maybe we increase a touch of contrast with curves. And here. And here. So we only care about this part. We'll paint the rest with a brush. We can use a brush now, less opacity, and a very large brush. And select a color. Oh, wrong. So this color, and now paint the rest of the stuff we don't need. Maybe a little more opacity. And whatever we don't need, we can just paint over. We just have to make sure that we do not change the shading areas too much in color. Maybe this color? Oh well. That's better. You really have to work very carefully here. Maybe like this. And here too, of course. So, now we have our horse extracted and offered him in a background which is much more pleasant because it's not hovering so much. So the processing is now finished. I'll see if there's anything else to do. Maybe increase the contrast a little bit with curves. So, here is the result. Okay, you can now export the image, and now it's ready for the catalog.